return. Welcome to the resurrection. Welcome to episode 4 of Horror Movies You Should Watch. It is so good to be back from the Shadow Realms, as I must deliver great content to all of my creatures of the night. I apologize for my absence. 2020 has been a dark age of eternal depression for me, which genuinely made it hard for me to make content for you, as I was simply not motivated to create. If you have not seen the previous episodes of this series, do check them out. If you wish to see future episodes, hit that subscribe button. What I do on this series is I pick 8 to 10 horror movies that I enjoy and would like to recommend to each and every one of you. Some movies may be known, some movies you may have never heard of. Either way, this show is for all of you. Now, the first movie I'd like to talk about today is a gem from the 1970s entitled All Colors of the Dark. Personally, I think the 1970s had an endless collection of horror gems, and watching them now with that 70s aesthetic, most of them are pretty cool, dark, and eerie. All Colors of the Dark essentially follows a woman named Jane living in London with her boyfriend Richard. Jane's mother was murdered when she was only 5. She had also recently lost her baby in a fatal car crash. Jane obviously is not in a good mental state. I would not be in a good mental state either if any of that had happened to me. So she constantly battles nightmares, fear, that kind of thing. She's convinced that if she participates in a black mass, and if she partakes in satanic rituals, it will wash her fears away. However, things take a turn when the black mass begins to bring her fears and nightmares to life. I personally thought this was a very unique film. The overall psychological darkness of the plot intrigues me. Moving on to what is considered by some to be a cult classic. We're gonna go to the 1980s thriller catalog with the well-known film Heathers, featuring the one and only Winona Ryder along with Christian Slater. I've seen this movie a dozen times, and while it is not your typical 80s slasher, it's still thrilling and quite dark. Basically, the film follows Veronica, played by the lovely Winona Ryder, who is part of the most popular group in her high school. However, she's not a fan of the cruel behavior of her fellow peers. She starts dating this guy named JD. No, not me, I get it. JD, yes, I get it. Different JD. This one is of course played by Christian Slater. She finds out that JD is intentionally killing students and getting away with it by making it look like they took their own lives. Veronica then goes through a race throughout most of the movie to stop JD. The movie is quite the adrenaline rush, and I definitely recommend it to all of you. Now let's go back to 1971 for this next flick entitled Hands of the Ripper. This movie basically follows the daughter of mysterious, popularly known serial killer Jack the Ripper. As she grows older, she is possessed by the spirit of her father, and through a state of trance, no, not Tiesto trance, psychotic trance, she goes on this killing spree. But when she comes back to normal, she has absolutely no recollection of her actions, and is full of regret. So a psychiatrist tries to take her in to help her condition in some way. He then realizes he's made a horrible mistake, of course. Personally, I always loved the Jack the Ripper character. I don't condone anything that serial killers do. It is fucked up, but the overall mystique and darkness of the character that is fictionally portrayed is interesting. And adding a daughter into the mix of things, I had to check this one out. It's really good. It's like I said earlier, the 70s truly had some gems. Another film from the 70s I wanted to talk about was the horror movie that fits more in the monster catalog, but is still really well done, entitled It's Alive! A Swedish film, I believe, which basically follows Lenore and Frank Davis, two parents who recently find out their newborn child is a vicious mutant monster who will kill anybody that gets in his way. They find out that the baby kills all the doctors and nurses at the hospital as it escapes. Frank attempts to destroy the baby. It is quite over the top, but definitely an interesting film to watch. Now, an underrated movie I wanted to talk about was a film entitled Frailty, which came out in 2001. God, I miss the early 2000s. With everything going on right now, I really miss the good old days. For me, at least. But anyways, this movie basically follows a blue-collar worker who lost his wife, and he has to destroy people revealed to him as demons. He begins the murders of what was known in Texas as God's Hand Killer. What's crazy is he has 2 kids, 2 sons, to be exact. One of the sons idolizes him and believes in what he is doing. The other one is disgusted and can't find the will to speak up and stop his father. The movie is definitely underrated and has a unique amount of shockers and twists. I highly recommend you check it out. Now I want to talk about The Brood. No, not the incredibly awesome WWF tag team in 1999. I'm going 20 years before that to 1979 to talk about the film that falls under the lines of both horror and sci-fi. Another genre that absolutely thrived in the 70s. When horror and sci-fi comes together, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, sometimes it's a little over the top or too corny. But few films have found that fine line and have been able to combine the two genres really well. This is one of those films. It follows a mad doctor who tries some psychoplasmic therapy type shit on a mentally ill woman who is soon to be a mother, and a plot like that can utilize both horror and sci-fi in a really unique way, as shown in this movie. I don't want to give away too much, so you should really give it a watch. Now I want to go back to 2009 to talk about the slasher flick entitled The House of the Devil, which basically follows Samantha, a college student who is desperate for money so she can move into a new place. She picks up this strange babysitting job and finds out rather than watching a child, she'll be watching someone's mother. And throughout the movie she discovers some sinister and horrifying things that her employers had kept from her, and they have plans to use her dead or alive. It is quite interesting. It's a fairly unique plot, and you should definitely check it out. Now this is incredibly unique what I'm about to dive into here. This is a combination of horror and romance, something that you don't see often in the world of films. I'm talking about the film from 2008, Let the Right One In. I watched this one recently and I absolutely loved it. The film follows a 12-year-old boy by the name of Oscar, who is a very sensitive child. He gets bullied a lot and he is living with his mother in Sweden, where he meets the new neighbor next door, a strange girl by the name of Eli. They end up becoming close, they develop a friendship. Eli eventually finds the courage to share her dark, macabre secret with Oscar, implying she was connected to a string of gruesome local bloody murders. They communicate to each other in Morse code, and the plot thickens and gets quite interesting. You should definitely check this one out. Now the next movie I wanted to dive into here is a 2016 flick entitled The Love Witch. Now I'll be honest, I'm a sucker for gothic, Victorian, witchcraft, occult type shit. That stuff is right up my alleyway. And this movie I immediately felt drawn to when I watched it. The movie centers around Elaine, who is a beautiful young girl who happens to be a witch, and she is desperate to find a man who loves her. She lives in this Victorian-style apartment making spells and potions, trying to seduce men and whatnot. You know, everyday stuff. But her spells kinda work a little too well, if you know what I mean. She ends up with several victims, and when she finally meets the man of her dreams, her desire for love drives her to the depths such as insanity and even murder. This movie is incredible. It's something you've got to watch, especially if you're into that dark gothic aesthetic. And the final movie I wanted to suggest for you guys today actually came out last year in 2020 and tackled some of the depressing realities we are surrounded with in the past year, and that is the movie Host, which kind of follows the concept of movies like Unfriended or The Den. The film takes place through video chatting and the internet and things like that, and they put it into a horror perspective. And I've always been fascinated with those kinds of movies when they're done right. Basically, 6 friends get together in a Zoom call, and they bring in the attention of some kind of strange demonic presence, and weird things start to happen in their houses and stuff. I will be honest, it is just nice to have a movie this year. There hasn't been many movies in the past year because of what is going on, and it was nice to see something new. And the movie was pretty good. It had an Unfriended vibe, which has always been fascinating to me. Anyways, that concludes episode 4 of Horror Movies You Should Watch. I hope you all stay safe. I hope this year is good to you. I will try my best to make content more often. Thank you guys for watching. I'll see you later.